I work as a legal expert in Milano Hub, that is the innovation center in Banca d'Italia, but I will describe a little bit about it later on. So let's start by framing the problem, so the alignment problem that we are discussing today. So according to this first law of technology, technology is not neutral, meaning that it could have, a deep impact on our society for the good or for the evil. It really depends on us, on how do we deploy the technology. And this first law of technology is even more relevant if we think of large language models, because they are being largely applied for human decision in different domains, like, for example, criminal judgments, but also financial domain and also health sector. So for us, it is essential that large language models are aligned with human values and goals. But when we, try to address the alignment problem, we need to consider different dimensions. First of all, human diversity, because we live in a pluralistic society. So we do have different set of values, different set of beliefs, meaning that events may not straightforward. Two people in the same scenario may take opposing decisions that are both equally valid. And this problem will be essential in the experiment that I will describe you later on. And in addition to that, we need to consider the transparency angle. So we need to make decision explainable to the final users. And finally, it's also a problem of democratic input, because we should not over-rely on AI deployers, but deploy large language models that, do represent our society as a whole. So the alignment problem is quite complex. And today I will cover it from two different perspectives. That's why you will see that my presentation will be divided into two parts. We will start from a lab experiment where I am going to share some practical insights that we have gained on the alignment problem together with my co-author Carolina. And then I will zoom out from this experiment to a policy tool, because I do think that in order to build, effective strategies for promoting responsible AI, we need to consider practical use cases, experimentation, and policy as two complementary aspects of the same path towards responsible AI. So that's why I decided to divide my presentation in two parts. So let's start from the lab research. With my co-author, Carolina Camassa, we write down this paper, Legal Minds Algorithmic Decision, How Large Language Models Apply Constitutional Principle in Complex Scenarios. And we presented it during last AI and Society conference. Carolina Camassa, my amazing co-author, let me thank her. She's an incredible engineer with a background in physics, and she's now working in the IT applied research team in Banca d'Italia. And she's focusing on generative AI. So together we combine my legal and policy background with their technological background to conduct this research. And you will see our double perspectives in this work. So let's start by the goal. Our goal was to evaluate GPT-4 alignment with different possible interpretation of constitutional principle, because remember that we are in a pluralistic society. And we decided to do it with an interdisciplinary approach, so combining my legal perspective and her technological perspective. And to do that, we identified three questions. So the basic question is, can GPT-4 analyze complex legal scenarios? The main question was to measure ChatGPT-4 alignment with existing view on bioethical issues. And then the third question was to measure ChatGPT-4 consistency across different interactions. So given these three questions, we started from the data set. We need to build our data set. So we decided to collect all relevant constitutional case law on bioethical issues. The question is, why case law? Why constitutional issues on bioethics? Well, starting from, the principle that law inform the code. So the idea that data set generated by law process can really facilitate the specification on human values that they are kind of opaque and vague. We thought that starting from case law could be a good ground for our experiment. And more specifically, we thought that starting from constitutional case law can be a good proxy for testing, ChatGPT-4 alignment with human values, because constitutional case law, in a certain way, embodies our values, our vision of society, And for the same constitutional principle that in a certain way represent our ethical principle, we do have different interpretations. So we have, the view of the pluralistic society, the idea of the nuanced scenario that I mentioned you at the beginning of this presentation of one of, most complex dimension of the problem of the alignment. So we thought that starting from case law, constitutional case law, could be a good starting point. In addition to that, we decided to focus on bioethical issues because probably they are the most polarizing issues. We always have different set of values at stake, different views of the same ethical principle. So it could be a good starting point to really stress test the ChatGPT-4 alignment with our human values. So we starting from building this data set, collecting all the relevant case law on bioethical issues. So this is, my legal perspective. And now we can move to the first question. So the first question was to measure the capacity of ChatGPT-4 to perform basic legal tasks, such as, summarize the text of the case law that we have identified, extract the main arguments. This is the starting point because we need to be sure that the model can perform this in order to proceed with our, experiment. And we decided to measure the performance of the model based on 3 criteria: completeness, consistency, and hallucination. So basically completeness, we measure if the model can identify all the principles and the arguments invoked by the parties, while consistency, we determine if the model can, understand and summarize the arguments without omitting or oversimplifying the content. And finally, hallucination, because we assess if the model invoked, arguments that were not mentioned by the parties, even though they look in a kind of way reasonable. And here on the right side, you see the chart with our evaluations, and we can say that overall the performance of the model is quite good. So obviously the model is capable of understanding and extracting arguments, legal arguments, though we still see some limitation because we notice that the model in certain cases lacks some, understanding of the content of the arguments, and in few cases the model hallucinated. These limitations are probably related by the fact that ChatGPT-4 needs more, specific training on the legal domain and specifically on certain technicalities of the constitutional case law. But still, overall, the performance was good, so we were able to move forward with our experiment. So now we can move to the main question of our experiment, that was measuring ChatGPT-4 with, a different position on same human values, because again, let me emphasize that in the constitutional case law, we do have different parties involved. So we do have different position on the same principle. So we have, a clear representation of human diversity. So let me now walk you through the methodology that we have followed. We decide, actually, Carolina suggests me to use the idea of cousin distance. So in order to measure the alignment of ChatGPT-4, we came up with the idea of measuring the distance between arguments. So the idea was that if we have a high distance between arguments invoked by the party and the arguments invoked by ChatGPT-4, then we don't have a strong alignment. While if we have a small distance between arguments, then it means that the model is aligned. And in order to apply this approach, we decided to use a text embedding model that we also fine-tuned. So let me now walk you through the steps. Firstly, obviously, we start from asking to the model to extract legal position and arguments for each party, and that was the content of the first question. Secondly, we embed the legal arguments within the custom model. Actually, Carolina did this. But after this step, we were kind of stuck because we realized that the model was not working well. Specifically, the model was not capable of truly understanding the difference among arguments. Because from a legal perspective, I was expecting that the model was capable of, let's say, clustering together similar arguments in the space, whilst pushing further these similar arguments. But at the beginning, we didn't see that. I would say that the model was more, like, I would say, like spread around, all the arguments. So we realized that the model was not able in capturing, the legal and semantic differences among arguments. And from the legal perspective, that was immediately clear to me, but we need a technological solution for that. And that's the point where we combined the most the two perspectives, because I realized that the model was not working, but Carolina then found the solution to fine-tune the model. So we decide to fine-tune the model with a contrastive loss function. So basically, for each case, we do extract pairs of arguments and we label them as concordant or discordant, similar or dissimilar. So again, here we applied my legal perspective. But then, starting from these labels, Carolina, with their technological background, was able to fine-tune the model. And after the fine-tuning, now the model was working, because now the model was able to move closer similar arguments while pushing further dissimilar arguments. So we were able to measure the cousin distance between arguments, and we were able to say, from a quantitative perspective, if ChatGPT-4 is aligned or not to certain positions. So we can move forward with our experiment. And that's why we ask the model to provide legal arguments for each case. So we ask ChatGPT-4 to impersonate a constitutional scholar and prepare, arguments for the cases that we have selected. And then we embed the arguments within, the embedding model, and we were able to measure, again, the distance between arguments. And so now this is the methodology. We can move to the outcomes from a quantitative analysis perspective. So we quantify the alignment with the alignment between ChatGPT-4 arguments and the position of the three parties involved. Again, we do have three parties with different positions on the same principles. And if we have lower cousin distance, it means that we have a closer alignment between ChatGPT-4 and a specific party. And we can say that on the basis of the result, ChatGPT-4 has a tendency to align more closely with the applicant. And the applicant is the part that usually stands for a more progressive position on the principle. Let me give you a concrete example. If you think of right to family, so our concept of family, obviously we do have a more structured concept of family in terms of biological relationship. Or on the other way around, we can have more families in the sense of a social construct. And so this could be seen as a more conservative or more progressive. And we see that ChatGPT-4 tends to align with a more progressive interpretation of family. That is not the more accepted one, I would say. Let me digress a little bit here to say that obviously was not in our intention to express our position or views on these bioethical issues. We just consider them for the sake of the experiment. So that was the outcome of the quantitative analysis. So ChatGPT-4 is aligned with progressive positions. But we were not satisfied with that. We want to, again, combine technological perspective and legal perspective. So alongside the quantitative analysis, we perform a qualitative analysis. Basically, I revise all the outcomes through the lens of a legal expert. And I can tell you that we can share with you three main outcomes, I would say. First of all, it's quite obvious. ChatGPT-4 provides us some quite simple and basic legal arguments, not completely satisfactory, I would say. But the two main outcomes are that we observe that the model tends to stand for a progressive position without considering, the negative consequences of this position. Let me give you an example. Like, for example, the model stands for the admission of the surrogate motherhood without considering the negative impact that this procedure can have on the health of the woman. And this is a major concern for us, obviously. And the third problem is that not only the model underestimate the consequence, but also the model oversimplify, the ethical dilemmas that is kind of considering, because we saw that the model stands clearly for a progressive position, but without carefully balancing all the different values that are at stake, all the different interpretations that you could have for these values. And I think we thought that this could be a huge risk when we use, the model for taking complex decisions. So this is, these are the outcomes of the second research question. We can now move to the third question that was measuring the consistency. So we ask ourselves, okay, the model is taking progressive position, but is taking them consistently across different interactions. And so we run again the experiment. Actually, Carolina ran again the experiment. He has the technological background to do that. And as you can see from the table, we can say that, you know, the model takes, you know, progressive position in a consistent way, because many times we run the experiment, many times we have seen the same outcomes. So let me now emphasize again the main outcomes that we have seen, the main, you know, practical insights that we would like to share with you. First of all, obviously, ChatGPT-4 can be an effective tool to perform basic legal tasks, no need to say, but it needs some human supervisions because we can have some problems in terms of accuracy and hallucination. Secondly, we need to be aware that the model clearly aligned with progressive position in taking, you know, complex decisions. And it could be good, but we need to be aware of this because probably the most progressive position is not the most accepted one when we came to, you know, to discuss to human values and visions of society. And thirdly, we need to be aware that the model oversimplifies complex decision scenarios. This is the major concern. No need to say our experiment, it has some limitations because we may consider other models, we may consider different legal domain, different cases, but that was a first attempt to conduct such an experiment with this, you know, interdisciplinary approach, combining my legal background with technological background of Carolina. But still, the insights that we have gained suggest us that we need, you know, robust assessment methods, that we need to truly understand the internal mechanics of AI to address these concerns. And this is not only a technological problem, it's also a legal problem, but on top of that, I would say it is an ethical problem because we need to build a common understanding of the human values that we would like to pursue in you know, deploying the models. So ultimately it's a problem of responsible AI because the alignment problem is also strongly interconnected with other issues in terms of AI. Because obviously when we think of human supervision that we need to introduce accountability frameworks, and also when we see that the model, you know, oversimplify the decision, that we need more transparency, meaning that we need to open up the model to understand where and why the model is oversimplifying the decision. And finally, is also a problem of fairness because we observe a bias, a progressive bias, and therefore a risk of discriminations. So given all these insights, the problem here is now, how can we convey these all practical insights that we have gained to policy and strategy making? You know, how can we bridge the practical implementation deployment of AI with a strategy that is aiming at promoting responsible AI? So to partially answer to this question, I will now zoom out from this specific experiment to, you know, explore this problem from a policy perspective. And specifically, the question is, how do we implement participatory mechanisms that can bring together all relevant stakeholders involved in shaping innovation to a responsible, you know, outcome? So basically, the scenario is like this. We do have AI makers, industry players that are, you know, deploying new AI solutions. We do have research and academia that are, you know, conducting, analyzing, experimentation, and gaining insightful, you know, outcomes on AI. And then we do have regulators and policymakers that are adopting new comprehensive frameworks, policy strategies aimed at promoting responsible AI without stifling innovation and market competition. And the question is, how can all these relevant stakeholders dialogue, cooperate together in building, you know, responsible AI? So this principle is nice to have, but we do need to implement it in a practical way. So today I will introduce you quickly how the Milano Hub work, because it could be a tangible example of, you know, how can we create space for dialogue among all the relevant stakeholders involved in the process of building responsible AI. So just a quick introduction. Banca d'Italia has set 3 innovation facilitators. So the idea is that the regulator and the policymaker can, in a certain way, support and interact with, innovative projects across the entire life cycle of the project. So from the early stage until the final implementation. And so we do have 2 innovation facilitators, but today I would like to focus on Milano Hub, our innovation center, that is supporting the growing of projects that are not still, finally implemented. And when I say projects, I say both, products and services that are going to be launched on the market, but also research and experimentation that are being conducted at, a more R&D level in the academia, I would say, environment. So we really engage and support different kinds of projects. So the question is, how do we engage with all these relevant stakeholders? So basically through our call for proposals that are invitation to the entire ecosystem to submit projects that are, leveraging technologies as AI to introduce new use cases to disrupt our industry and definitely that are impacting on our society. And the call for proposal, let me underline again, is open to the entire ecosystem so that we are engaging with not only industry players, but also research and academia, sector association. So we are building dialogue with, all the relevant stakeholders, with a group of diverse and representative stakeholders. And our aim is to select the best projects in order to support them and also share best practice and common standards on responsible innovation. So the second question would be, okay, but how do we support these projects? So imagine that for each project that we select, that again, the project could be either a product to be marketed or research and experimentation to be conducted and to be finalized. So remember that for each project, we set up an interdisciplinary team composed of professionals coming from all the departments of Banca d'Italia. So we offer a wide array of different competencies from, IT, legal, policy, regulation competencies. So we do have the interdisciplinary approach that is necessary to address all the relevant challenges related to technology. And imagine that our multidisciplinary team, they do work hand in hand for 6 months with the call for proposal participants. So we sit together at the table to analyze the project, to see the potential pitfalls, to see the benefits and try to, improve the project, to work out all the details. So is a true space for collaboration and dialogue. And in addition to that, we provide some interesting opportunity, both at national and international level, to showcase the projects so that we can foster the dissemination of best practice and common standards on responsible innovation. So given this support, now we can try to focus on the impact that we do have on the projects. Because remember that I started from the question, how can we build, participatory mechanisms so that we can involve all the stakeholders in shaping innovation? So the question here is that how do we impact on these projects? How do we make this project better from a response, for considering the final goal of building responsible AI? So starting from the regulation perspective, by working together on these projects, we can, assess the impact of regulation on concrete use cases so that we can identify potential gaps and try to find some adjustments. And at the same time, we can offer regulatory guidance so that we can help all the relevant stakeholders in navigating, the complex legal frameworks that we are now adopting. And from the technological perspective, obviously, by working together, we can gain some practical insights on, AI-related risks, and we can work on the project at the early stage so that we can effectively address all the risks or try to mitigate them before that we have the final solution implemented yet. And at the same time, we can measure if our policies are, resilient enough, future-proof enough to keep up with all the technological changes that we are now observing. And I would like to emphasize again that we are promoting dialogue in the sense that we are creating an effective space for dialogue among all the different stakeholders so that we can share mutual learnings, mutual insights. Obviously, this approach has some limits because we are a public authority, so we cannot interfere with fair competition. And in addition to that, we need to draw clear boundaries between, the support that we offer in Milano Hub in working together on these projects with other institutional roles that we do have, and they do have different goals and different approaches. So this is the approach of Milano Hub to create a participatory mechanism to create responsible innovation, and also obviously to tackle with the alignment problem. So let me now move to the final takeaways of my presentation. Starting from the beginning, obviously, when we consider the alignment problem, we need to be aware that it is a complex problem with different dimensions, from the idea of pluralistic society, we need democratic input, and this alignment problem is strongly connected with other AI issues like transparency, explainability, but also fairness. And to try to truly, understand and address all the risks, we need to conduct interdisciplinary experimentations so that we can analyze the problem from different angles, and to have, I would say, an holistic approach to tackle them. But after that, we have gained all these insights on use cases, on practical experimentation, that we need to bridge all these, we need to convey all these insights to policymaking, to, regulators, in order to have effective strategy, to have effective governance for AI. And in other words, I would say that we do need innovative policy tools to promote dialogue between public actors, industry players, and the entire ecosystem, so also research and academia and sector association, because we need to collectively work together to, build strategies for responsible AI. And given this principle, I thought that Milano Hub, the innovation center where I work with, is a positive and tangible example of cooperation among different stakeholders to build responsible AI and responsible innovation, because it's a concrete example of working together in developing projects while trying to mitigate all the related risks. So this is basically my speech for today. But before leaving the floor to the question, if you are interested in reading the paper, Legal Minds Algorithmic Decision, you can scan the QR code. And let me thank you again, my co-author, Carolina. We did an amazing job together, combining with our two different perspectives. Well, if you are interested in know more about Milano Hub, our call for proposal work, or the projects that we have admitted, or if you are interested in submitting a proposal, that you can scan the QR code and you will know more. Obviously, here you have also my email if you want to reach out for some more question or information.